If there's one thing that I never expected an original PlayStation to be able to do, that would be playing back a full-feature film. I'm the Soundtracker, and this is the PS1 Video CD movie card. Yep, the PS1 can play movies, and that was a pretty big shock to me when I first found out because the most I've ever seen of its media functionality is the ability to play CDs with that awesome music visualizer. It's a great game system with a particularly good CD player attached, but that's all I've ever known it to be until recently, when I found this adapter card for the video CD format. On the off chance you haven't seen one of these before, video CD is both the technological and spiritual predecessor to DVD. The format runs on MPEG-1 video compression, and typically a film is split across anywhere from 2 to 4 discs because a CD can only hold around 80 minutes of compressed video. When I say compressed, I do mean compressed, and to get an idea of what we're going to be dealing with visually, this is the raw output of my combination video CD/Laserdisc player. Video CD by its nature suffers from a visual compression artifact called macro blocking. Those very apparent little blocky squares on screen are pretty prominent throughout quickly changing scenes in any film on this format. Comparing that to the home video standard of the time, VHS tape is a bit better as far as this screen is concerned, especially with the lack of artifacts from macro blocking. The resolutions are comparable, but VHS very clearly beats out VCD for the consistency in the image. However, flat screens were not the arena these formats used to fight in. It really isn't fair to expect too much out of either format when pairing it with today's displays, since VCD and VHS were designed to operate on CRTs, and the viewing experience from one of those is a bit different, with both formats not quite as harsh an experience to view. The quality of VHS and VCD might not be great by today's standards, but they both absolutely had their place in the 90s video market. I'm more familiar with VHS given where I grew up. It was my family's rental and purchase format of choice, but video CD was that for a lot of other countries across the world. My collection, for instance, has discs that were minted in the Philippines, Spain, Taiwan, Indonesia, lots of different places. From what I've heard, video CD was especially favored over VHS in some areas due to its ability to better withstand harsher climates. They were a cheaper alternative to DVD when those took off, they were easier to produce, better to store. A number of different factors made this the home movie format of choice outside the US. The popularity of the format is also pretty well exemplified for me in the amount of devices I've come across that can play them back. As for instance, I showed earlier this Laserdisc player with video CD compatibility. Computers are capable of playing and burning video CDs. I found portable units like this one that even come with a remote control for the full format experience. Many of the DVD players I've encountered are able to play them, and a number of consoles like the Philips CDI and Sega Saturn had official support for video CD by way of an add-on card. I'm a fairly recent adopter of this format, and the amount of film releases and devices that could play the format overall were pretty surprising to me. That kind of support doesn't happen if a format isn't doing well somewhere in the world, so it makes sense to me that a few companies might try to make an add-on card for a system that doesn't typically support video CD. I say typically because Sony also tried their hand at a version of the PlayStation that had VCD playback built in, model number SCPH-5903. According to ConsoleVariations.com, this model was only released in Asia, didn't sell well, and they are pretty hard to come across as a result. I'd love to find one someday though. Even though that particular iteration of the console didn't sell well, video CD was very popular as a format, and given that the majority of PlayStation consoles left VCD playback out of the mix, it seems only natural that other companies would take up the reins and manufacture an add-on card like this one. As far as I can tell, this is not an official Sony device, despite having their branding on it, and we'll get into that in a minute. I'm not actually sure who was manufacturing these, but I've seen a few similar cards with different names. Gamars and Top King come to mind. And while there are some minor variations in the functionality of different cards, this one is very straightforward as playing PlayStation games on one setting and watching video CD on the other. It's a very simple design as well. One end has the attachment points for the card to connect to the parallel port and the AV port, but it's worth noting that due to the original model of PlayStation not having the appropriate clearance for the RCA jacks, this card is unable to connect to an early PS1. Unfortunately, the same is also true for a later revision of the PS1 because the parallel port was removed entirely, so this only works with that sweet middle ground of PlayStation. Attaching the card is also admittedly a little bit of a chore. It has to be done at an angle because the card was designed to sit flush with the curvature of the PlayStation. Once you've done it a couple of times, it does become easier though. The back of the card has a pass-through for the AV multi-out as well as the addition of straightforward RCA jacks, which I'm pretty happy to see. It's a nice touch. The only minor inconvenience is the serial port's now blocked, and the card will need to be removed if you want to use the serial link. When I first bought this video card, I thought that's all that was necessary because it has Sony's branding on it. I mean, their name, their product, right? Well, apparently not. I popped a video CD in and expected the movie to just fire right up, and instead the TV went to a black screen and just stayed there. I decided to try out a PlayStation disc mainly because I wanted to see if it would change anything, and when this screen loaded up, I thought, success! I've done it! I followed the prompts on screen to swap the disc out with a video CD, waited for a good while to make sure that it didn't just take some time to load, and apparently following directions just gets you nowhere sometimes. I did some poking around online and started noticing after a little while that a few of these movie cards have springs pictured with the devices, and that's when it hit me exactly how bootleg this supposedly Sony decoder is. In the back of a PlayStation is a switch that tells the console the lid is closed to start running the disc. This peg here on the lid comes down and makes contact with the switch, ensuring a disc is only run when the lid is securely closed, or if you get creative with a ballpoint pen. The spring that was previously sold with this card I don't have, but fortunately replacements are easy to find at home improvement stores. That's good news for me because the point of having a spring in place over the peg and switch is to trick the PlayStation into thinking the lid is closed when in reality you're going to need to open it a few times throughout the course of a film without the system knowing about it. The spring is only the first ingredient though. We also need the official PlayStation disc from earlier to get the video card jump-started. PlayStation games are mastered with something on the read area of the disc called a wobble groove. It's essentially a bit of clever code that tells the PlayStation this is a legitimate disc at startup. When the disc spins at a different rate, the console is looking for the authenticator mark on the disc, and as it happens, that bit of code is necessary for the video card to work without modding the PlayStation. Once the authentication code is read, we come back to that screen from before, prompting us to swap out the official PlayStation disc for a video CD. This time around, having the spring in place keeps the switch pressed, which keeps that authentication check in memory, and that's how to get this card to run. As long as the spring stays in place, the movie card will work properly because, as far as the system is concerned, all's well. Starting a film is as easy as pressing any of the buttons on the controller. The disc starts up and for a moment the transport controls flash across the bottom of the screen, then disappear if you don't interact with them. Pressing L2 will bring them back up, and something that is admittedly a bit of a departure for me, the circle key is the one used to select which options you want. I'm more used to that being the X key. Pressing fast forward or fast reverse will advance the video in either direction, forwards or backwards, by 30 seconds. Skip back and forth work exactly as you'd expect. They skip backwards and forwards across the tracks on the disc, but the advent of tracks on a video CD is actually pretty rare from what I've seen. The only way to get the movie to continuously fast forward, though, is to head over to the F key. This plays the disc at a lightning speed of 2x. Most typical feature films aren't actually divided with tracks like the video CD I just showed, they just have that 70-minute chunk of movie. The first disc of Mulan, for instance, only has 2 chapters on it. The first is this warning label, and the second is the beginning of the feature film. Trying to skip once you've made it to the movie only results in the transport controls being taken off screen. As for the rest of the functions, R2 brings up the total runtime of the disc, R1 shows the soundtrack is playing in stereo, and L1 cycles between main for the left channel, sub for the right channel, and back into stereo. It's pretty functional, and in case you're curious, here's a sample of footage from the unit's AV output.
I don't think cost is the issue here, sir. I think the issue should be my blatant disregard for proper procedure.
You damn right, wise ass. The mail call.
Please. Please help her.
I know your face. There we
鱼贩们在标鱼，快就是新鲜。大家忙着把鲜鱼往内陆及大城市。
And that's more or less everything the adapter can do. It's a simple MPEG-1 decoder that plays video back at a resolution of 352 by 240 with basic but functional transport controls. And honestly, that's really all it needed to be for the PlayStation as an add-on. Flipping the switch will shut off the decoder and bring you back to regular PlayStation functionality. You don't even need to remove the card from the system to keep using it, whether it's playing a game or listening to a CD. I was floored by this device when I found out about it because I remember how revolutionary it felt to be able to watch DVDs on a PS2, or when streaming platforms became available on consoles, or Hell, even just being able to play an audio CD on a PlayStation was a huge deal by itself, and finding out all these years later that it was possible to watch movies on one too? Hell yeah! As impressed as I am with that as an ability, though, I don't think it would have taken off in the US, mostly for the fact that I just don't recall video CD being very popular as a format out here. The most likely exception to that would be computer enthusiasts, because you could burn your own discs, and being able to make a home movie or a slideshow had some appeal. To my recollection, though, for pre-recorded stuff at least, video CD just wasn't the way to go because every single home had at least one VHS player. That was just the way people watched movies in my neck of the woods. I am curious, though, I mean, if there was a section of the US that, video CD was more popular in, please let me know in the comments. I wonder, though, if Sony had kept the ability to play video CD in the PlayStation, do you think it would have gotten people interested in a new format, or do you think it would have been prohibitively expensive / less appealing? Let me know what you think in the comments. As for myself, I've really enjoyed using this, and if I'd have had this device back when PlayStation was the console to have, I'd have probably gone nuts. Games, movies, and music on the same system in 1995 was and is revolutionary. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, you know what to do.